Hiya, thanks for checking in with us today. Today we are lucky enough to have Nick Dale with us from Stop the Traffik, and we're going to be talking about human trafficking today. Now, you might think it's a bit of a strange subject for us and a little bit offline, but in terms of the duty of care, one of the things with looking after people and making sure that they're being well cared for and well looked after and their overall well-being, this is a subject that comes into it. So, Nick, could you just introduce yourself and tell us what you do, please?
Hi, so my name's Nick Dale. I am the Director of Intelligence for Stop the Traffik. We're a global intelligence and prevention-based human trafficking charity. And my background is I worked in West Midlands Police for 23 years. I retired in September last year. And probably for the past 10 years of my career, I've been tackling issues around organised crime, including organised exploitation, human trafficking, modern slavery, in investigations and intelligence, as well as a lot of other stuff.
Okay, so this seems like a sort of a Hollywood sort of topic, really, human trafficking. Could you give us a little brief description of what human trafficking in a modern sort of world entails?
Yeah, of course. So human trafficking relies on three elements. First of all, the movement of people, and that's anything from arranging travel to actually physically moving people to receiving people in a location. There's also the element of exploitation. So using force, threats, deception, using anything from physical force to exploiting a vulnerability or exploiting a sort of difference in the balance of power in order then to exploit them to gain some benefit. So those benefits could be anything from labour exploitation, so to criminal exploitation, sort of county lines type exploitation, organ harvesting, sexual exploitation, domestic servitude. So those three elements of travel and then the exploitation to actually have some benefit for the traffickers.
Doing that. So in the UK at the moment, how prevalent of a problem is this at the moment?
So in the UK, we think there's around about anything from around 100 to 130,000 victims of human trafficking and modern slavery at any one time.
Okay, so quite significant then.
Massively.
And do you see any particular industries that are sort of more prone to it, or that it happens more in? Is there sort of, does that?
Yeah, so I suppose what interests you most is what we'd call the labour exploitation side of things, where people are brought into an industry to provide labour to and are exploited, so they don't have full access to their rights and their wages. And we see this in a lot of industries which attract maybe unskilled labour, maybe the seasonal labour, people coming in from outside the country. It's worth pointing out, while I remember, that you don't have to be just trafficked into the UK. You can be trafficked within the UK as well. So people can be brought into the country and then moved around in the UK, or people can simply be moved around in the UK for this type of offence. But those sort of seasonal work, such as working in fields, picking fruit and vegetables, working in construction, working in recycling and waste removal and that sort of thing. And the care industry and the catering industries are where there's the requirement for a large number of workers and not a huge amount of money. Your profit margins are tight.
Oh no, yeah. Those things where it's like, so you're looking at like things where it's like events and things like that, where it's like you just need people for a bit of time.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And the bad actors in this space, the people who are willing to exploit their workers, can often undercut the people who are responsible about how they deal with their workforce. So when we talk about the victims, we talk predominantly about the victims of this crime being the people who are exploited, and that's absolutely right. But other companies are victims of this as well, because they're undercutted by the bad actors.
Yeah, by those companies. You're trying to compete with someone that's not paying a fair price.
Exactly.
And I guess from what we do on the safety side, it's not, providing the right adequate training and PPE.
100%. And if you're talking about health and safety, it's a really interesting point, because a company that will take the health and safety seriously will invest in it. Are really investing in their workers, aren't they? So if you're not if there's a company not investing in the health and safety side of things, then there's more likely to be exploitation in that labour
with that.
force.
Yeah. And in terms of the size of businesses this affects, is there a sort of a general size? Is it like small businesses, micros, big? Or is it across the board?
This can affect businesses of all sizes, and probably the best way to answer that is that the example of an investigation that I picked up 10 years ago in the West Mids, and this affected businesses from sort of sole traders to small businesses here in the West Midlands to massive PLCs and conglomerates, where there was an organised crime group who were recruiting in Poland, who were recruiting vulnerable victims in Poland, bringing them to work in the UK, putting them to work in all sorts of industries, from the construction industry to working on farms to recycling. And there was one particular business, a sort of small business here in the West Midlands, that was building sheds and fences for some of the larger distributors. And they were supplied work from a local recruitment agency, and that recruitment agency had somebody from the organised crime group embedded in the recruitment agency.
Right, okay.
And they were on site on this small business, and they were funneling victims into this small business. And this was obviously affecting the that they were building sheds and fences that were being then sold by large conglomerates across the UK. So it can affect businesses of all sizes.
All sides, yeah. And I guess that's one thing with that supply chain feeding into it. Even if you think you might be, buying someone from like a large retailer, for example, there's often like smaller businesses that feed into that as well, aren't they? Supply chain's often quite sort of, long and straight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if you were a business owner and you were found guilty of being involved with trafficking or, anything relating to this, what kind of, how could it work for you? If you're a business owner and this impacted you, whether you're knowing or unknowingly, involved with it, what kind of things would you expect to happen to you?
Yeah. So during the course of the investigation I'm talking about, we came across, I'd say, three different types of businesses. We came across the businesses who were conspiring with the traffickers.
Yeah.
We came across some businesses who I feel were turning a blind eye to it. And some businesses were doing a really good job in identifying issues. Once issues have been identified to them, investigating it, protecting their workers. So there's anything from, for example, there was a sole trader recruitment agency who said to us in police interview, all that I did was I offered myself, to bring workers into this parcel company, and my phone lit up, and he was bringing in dozens of workers into this parcel. We convicted him, and he was given 7 years prison sentence. Somewhere in the middle, there are companies who, first of all, there's a reputational risk, and aside from the human rights side of this issue, no company wants themselves on the front pages of the papers. So a number of supermarkets were on the front page of the Sunday Times, essentially saying your onions, etc., are being picked by slaves, because a number of supermarkets were involved in that. So nobody wants that reputational risk. And I would imagine, I've never worked in business, but I'd imagine that rolls downhill. So suppliers who have failed to eradicate this from their supply chain and are supplying to a large, conglomerate, I'd imagine that affects their business. But businesses are being affected by being sued by. There's been sort of class actions against some of the businesses in the supply chains here, and that they've been sued as well. So there's anything from the kind of criminal risk that if people are actually, and I'm not suggesting that anybody watching this will be, but criminal risk if anybody are actually engaged with conspiring with the traffickers, to the reputational risk, to the civil risk of being sued if you're if you're found to be sort of liable for failing to sort of care for your workforce, if you like,
take the right measures to,
But I think the most important thing here is, any good, as I say, I've never worked in business, but I do know that any good business or organisation does it off the back of their workforce. So having people who are protected and happy and want to come to work and engaged in work is the best way to run your business, isn't it? So you might get some short-term cheap labour in, but that labour is not going to be good, and it's not going to be driving your business forward. I would
Yeah.
suggest, but like I say, I'll leave that consultancy side to
I
you.
don't 100% completely agree. We talk about this all the time. You know, we do it at the safety and on the business side. And what you want to do is you want to create two sides, really. You want to create an environment where, one, everyone wants to work with you, things like that, good reputation, you know, nice clean policies and practices with things like, you know, Monday slavery, trafficking, that kind of thing. Forms a key part of it. And then, yeah, like you said, on the supply side, you want an organisation that everyone wants to work for.
Exactly.
So it 100%. It all works well together.
And we were seeing workers who were doing double shifts. You know, we were seeing workers who were working through the night and then being forced to go to work. We were seeing workers who were driving for a parcel company. Whilst being exploited and probably doing, you know, other shifts as well. So that, you know, it can be really dangerous.
Yeah, I completely get that. So, and if I were, so say for example, I'm a business owner, and I know from watching the documentary you did before in the program on it, and another interview you did as well, actually, it's not always that easy for the business owners to often know, is it? So, no. For example, some of they're paying them, they're turning up to work, they're paying them money into their bank account. So if I was a business owner, and what sort of that's what I'm looking for, what sort of the telltale signs or, you know, things that I should be alert to and aware of to make sure that, you know, this isn't sort of happening in my organisation?
Yeah, so this is the thing that can be quite difficult, because it's not the sort of crime where, you know, if you see somebody punched in the street, you know you've witnessed an assault. This is far more subtle than that. And like you say, and it can happen in lots of different ways. And like you say, sometimes the traffickers can insert themselves into perfectly legitimate ways to supply workers. So they can appear on the surface to have a bank account and be lawfully working in the country on a visa and all that. But if the trafficker has arranged that for them and has control of their bank account and is taking money off them, and they might take that money off different ways. They might take it from control of the bank account. They might take it from convincing them that they've got to have accommodation and transport from a certain from them and overcharge for that. So it can be really subtle. But I think the first thing is to understand what human trafficking and modern slavery is, and to accept that it can happen in your supply chain. And the second thing is to care, because like I said, you've got to care about your workforce anyway, because that's how you run a good business. But if you care about the people who are coming into your business, whether they're your workforce or contractors coming in, you know, ask the question of, what is this person's story in this place? And if, for example, they're coming to work really tired, is it because they've worked another shift before, either for you or another organisation? So first thing, that's to care. So understand it and care about it. And then there's understanding your own business and your supply chain. And this is, you know, whenever I'm talking to businesses, they're the experts. I can talk about human trafficking and modern slavery. I wouldn't pretend I'm an expert because I haven't. There's so much of it that I can't pretend I've seen, you know, anywhere near all of it. But people who run businesses are experts in their own business and supply chain. So they understand that, and then they can understand the risks. So where are you getting your and it's not just about your own workers, of course, it's about your supply chain. So if you're getting products and materials from countries that are high risk, and then if you're and those would be places like China, a lot of places in Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo, places like that, you know, and the internet and AI are great things because you can research that. So high risk supply chains, looking at your workforce, where are you getting it from, and again, are they coming from high risk countries as well? So you know, we get a lot of victims of trafficking coming into the UK from Eastern Europe, a lot from sort of Vietnam. A lot of refugees will be victims of this, and then have a look at your workforce and even ask some questions. You know, there's nothing wrong with sitting people down, and as part of your tackling modern slavery statement and your obligations to this. There's nothing wrong with sitting your workforce down and saying, what's your accommodation like? Who do you pay your accommodation to? Have you got access to your bank account? When you got your visa, did somebody come in and help you with that visa? Some of those questions can be really quite simple, and if they're cagey about it, or those questions get back to, you know, there's one person outside your organisation or outside the supply chain of workers to you, then that might be a red flag for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I guess the part of doing that and that engaging with your staff and talking to them comes into the broader, sort of sense of well-being of a staff member anyway, and you can build it into that conversation, can't you? As an opportunity.
Exactly right. It doesn't have to be a conversation about human trafficking, modern slavery. It's just a conversation to get to know your workforce.
Are you doing okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I get that. So, and if I was aware of it, either business owner or someone else in an organisation, how would you go about reporting it? Is it direct to the police, or is there other institutions? Or
so there's a number of different ways, and one thing I should say here about the understanding of it is, if you're running a business, you'll only see a certain part of that business. So one thing I would encourage is having a whistleblower policy, so a really good, robust way of workers being able to report internally but confidentially what's happening. You can bolster that with a kind of external reporting capability. I would say, if you think that human trafficking and modern slavery is affecting workers in your workers, the first port of call should be reported to the police. It's a criminal offence. It's maximum life imprisonment. It's a really serious offence. So report it to the police and cooperate with the police. If you're not sure, there are places that you can seek help. If you're not sure, then speak to other people. There's a collaboration called Stronger Together, for example, which is a collaboration of businesses that kind of put their differences aside when it comes to human trafficking and modern slavery, and share best practice. So I would encourage people to work with them. We've got a reporting line, so I would also encourage people to get their workers to download the Stop app on their phone. So that's a really easy. So if you go on the Stop the Traffik website, you can download the Stop app. It's a really easy way to report your concerns, and those can be. So if you get your workers to download the app, they can report their concerns from internally, and it can be done anonymously. But anybody, when they're out and about, if they see spot signs, they can see it. But if there's a suspicion that there is human trafficking, modern slavery in the supply chain, they can reach out to us as well, either through the Stop app or our website. And we're always really interested in intelligence on trafficking. It's what we do. We take intelligence, we develop it. We work with law enforcement and other agencies and organisations to help tackle it. And some of the stuff we do can help, right? So some of the stuff, for example, we've got a bunch of financial institutions who are clients of ours. So if there is trafficking in the supply chain, we often identify it from a little piece of intelligence that comes through the Stop app or the website, and then we can work to develop that intelligence, but work then with the financial institutions, because we work to reduce the recruitment of vulnerable people, the demand for traffic labour, but also that access to legitimate financial systems in order to launder the money, in order to put that through. So that's really interesting. I love that idea about the business use sharing best practices as well, and collaborating on that, because I think that's really useful, and that information sharing, across industries and across businesses, I can imagine that's really effective. Exactly.
Which is great. So in terms of assistance and guidance, that kind of thing, you mentioned about the Stop app you can get from Stop the Traffik. Are there other good sources of information if anyone wants to do any further reading or get a bit more knowledge about it? Yeah, I've mentioned them already, but Stronger Together are a really good source of information. If you go on their website, there's some good materials, and you can consider joining Stronger Together. I think there's a small fee, but they haven't paid me to say this. I think there's a small fee, but like I say, you're then working with other businesses to understand the threat, and hopefully that the point of this is that people realise the threat isn't something that's only affecting other people, that only affects one particular industry or one particular size of business. It can affect everybody. So if everybody gets together, that's the whole point of Stronger Together. If everybody gets together, they can help tackle the threat. Okay, brilliant. And I think it's really interesting as well, you're saying about something like I'd have really thought of before, and that a lot of other people probably wouldn't, about people being trafficked around the UK as well. So when we think about trafficking, we think about, it's international, and, it's people from elsewhere, from other parts of the world. That's something really worthwhile to factor in as well, is that internal. Exactly. The highest number of people who are victims of human trafficking in the UK are actually
UK citizens. And that is mostly criminal exploitation through county lines, type exploitation. But there are also, you also see examples of people being exploited, people who are really vulnerable being exploited and moved around the country, maybe working in sort of manual labour jobs. And when you read those stories, they're really sad stories because sometimes these people have grown up with it, and you know, I've seen cases of people who have worked, who have been exploited for sort of 20 or 30 years, and it is their life, and that's the other thing not to forget about this is it is a crime type that takes over the victim's life.
It's taking advantage of vulnerable people, essentially.
Exactly,
it? You know,
exactly.
Wherever they are. So.
And then, of course, the other internal trafficking is, you know, a lot of people are brought into the country, people from Eastern Europe, people from Africa, South America, for example. And once the traffickers have them in the country, they will try and bleed them for everything they've got, right? So they won't just stick to one type of exploitation or one industry, and they'll move them. So if the seasonal work dries up, they'll move them into construction. We've seen cases where people are kind of in a holding pattern of exploitation in the home, of you know, or doing work around the house, whilst waiting to be put in another, exploited somewhere else.
Going somewhere else, they'll really make them.
They'll bleed them for everything.
Sort of every minute of every day.
Exactly.
To use them somewhere.
Exactly.
No. Well, it's something else to about. It's a really important topic, I think, especially in this day and age. And really appreciate Nick coming down and talking to us today. So we will share the details of Stop the Traffik, which is the charity that Nick works for. We'll put many other links that we think are relevant. We'll put in the comments and along with this post as well. If you want any more details on it, feel free to get in touch with me, office@bradleysconsultancy.co.uk. Like I said, we're going to share Stop the Traffik's details as well, so you can also get in touch with Nick as well. Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot, Nick, for your time. Really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man, and hopefully this has enlightened some people on this important topic.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for that. Brilliant. Well, one tiny little bit to edit out. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I did waffle a bit, but